What's up, guys? I'd like to welcome you to episode 7 of the PR podcast, the Progressive Resistance podcast, here to put some fat on your brain. I have my second guest of the podcast today, Phillip Velayo, talking about some good stuff. I hope you enjoy it. Think about it, ponder it, apply it to your life. Episode 7 of the Progressive Resistance podcast brings me with my second guest, Phil Velayo. Do you prefer Phil or Philip? I call you both.
Phil works. Yeah, I think
Okay.
Phil is more the natural progression of now I'm getting older.
Philip, really? Philip was the younger version?
Yeah.
Interesting. I would think that would be the opposite.
Yeah.
Phil is the man behind the camera, so to speak. He is the guy kind of running the show for my social team, as I've begun to call it. So I had been teasing him that I was going to have him on the podcast, and little did he know that I wasn't teasing. So I think there's some good topics that we can touch on together, and hopefully give some insights, get some thought-provoking things for you guys, stuff to ponder, and see where it takes us. So Phil, thanks for being here on my guest. Thanks for having me as your guest in your studio again, and excited to get episode 7 going.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate
Sure,
it.
man. So just to give the people some context of who they're listening to, let's get to know Phil a little bit.
Ooh, this is always a tough one. So born and raised in Anchorage, Alaska. Spent 16 years up there. My family immigrated from the Philippines in the 70s, and so I was first generation Americans up there. Moved down to Las Vegas in high school for a couple years, graduated out of there, and then at 18 years old, I decided to serve my country and enlisted in the Marine Corps, and spent 11 years there. Enjoyed my time, learned a lot about myself, as people will say, use it as a rite of passage into manhood, right? I say that now, but lots of things as I get older start to kind of peel back the layers of programming and kind of all the things, right?
Yeah.
But landed a job here in Cody, Wyoming right afterwards, working for a company called Gunworks, which I'm sure people that are local are obviously familiar with, but people that are in the long-range hunting industry will definitely be really familiar with. So taught for them for a couple of years, and then now I am doing my own thing now with a company called Modern Day Sniper. Me and my business partner, Kalen, and we go around and we teach long-range shooting to civilians, military, law enforcement, snipers, and long-range hunters. So we do that here in Cody, Wyoming, in Washington, and throughout the whole United States. And we've actually had now 4 international clients, Germany, UK, and some Swedish clients as well. So it's been fun to see that grow.
Cool. Now, how long since you started Modern Day Sniper?
We started Modern Day Sniper in 2020. Started with a podcast, actually. And it was 2 snipers that were just super passionate about long-range shooting, about our community. And we realized that there was really no information, because I think podcasts were starting to blow up at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Kalen and I got on the mic, started sharing our experiences, hoping to reach the younger level of snipers and the snipers that were still in, to give them just valuable information that's not regurgitated. Now, so the 3 years now, going on 4.
Cool. What was that shift like, leaving, being gainfully employed to going, hey, I'm going to do my own thing? How did that feel?
Man, it's scary, right? Even when I left the Marine Corps, you build a lifestyle around the 1st and 15th. You know you're getting paid. All you got to do is show up with everything you got. Do what you're told to a certain extent, and whether you're the worst performing, sergeant or staff sergeant, or the best performing, you're still going to get paid, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, transitioning to Gunworks, still same thing. I was on salary there. I always got paid every 2 weeks, and now with modern day cyber, you know, I always feel like I'm never doing enough. We had this conversation a few weeks ago. You know, I always feel like there's stuff that needs to be done, and I just feel like I'm always behind. But it's been good because, you know, we've talked about this, is kind of like going back to choose your own hard. You know, and it's like I'm going to build my dream, not somebody else's.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a scary shift, right? I've made that shift as well, right? And I think anyone that does experiences that same little bit of angst, the anxiety. Hey, if you're lucky, maybe even get some panic attacks in there, all that good stuff. Accompanies trying to build that dream and chase that dream. And I came to this realization a couple weeks ago, and it just got me thinking about it, hearing you talk this morning. But I was pondering, like, what is it that I'm really afraid of as I start diving into stuff like that, or diving into my own dreams? And I kind of came to the realization that for most of us, and there may be some exceptions, but probably not very many, I think the thing that we're really afraid of isn't the failure. We talk about that. We talk about how, like, what if it doesn't make money? What if I can't support my family? What if all of these things? And like, yeah, that's there. But I almost feel like the fear is more based out of, like, what if you succeed?
Yeah.
Because now there's this heightened level of accountability, and this heightened level of this workload, and all these unknown problems that's eventually going to bring, that you're going to have to solve. And I think sometimes the fear comes from that more than it does the failure. The fear comes from, what if I succeed? Like, what if this takes off? Like, what does that look like? And then more employees and more, I mean, it compounds and it snowballs that way. And I think sometimes we don't realize it, but the fear comes more from the success than it does the failure. Because it's like, you said, choose your hard. Right now, I think there's lots of things taking off in the social world and the podcast world. And there's a lot of people that talk shit on it, and they're like, oh, it's cliche and all this, the self-help, self-development, and, all the cliche things like choose your hard and no one's coming to save you. I'm like, yeah, but like I said in one of my earlier podcasts, what I believe makes things cliche is that they're true and nobody's fucking doing it.
Yeah.
So as we talk about those things, it's like, well, choose your hard, because the waiting for the 1st and the 15th, that's hard. Especially if you're in a spot where you're struggling to make ends meet, or you have goals or a certain lifestyle or things that you want to work towards, and that's not going to get you there. That's hard too. Or the challenges of working for someone else. When you've got, dreams and aspirations that you feel like you're just sitting out there and you're doing nothing with because your time's invested towards someone else. So it's pretty interesting when you start thinking about that. But like I said, a couple weeks ago, I was like, I don't think I'm as afraid of failing as I am of maybe, what if this really works? And it's just an interesting perspective.
I think, yeah, you become a victim of your own success, right? When things start to go right, and then you're unable to manage tasks correctly or manage your time. And then obviously this rolls into leadership as you start bringing people onto your team, right? What does that look like? Do they have the same vision as you? And are you articulating, your message or your dream so that, your employees or subordinates have what it takes to accomplish that mission, right? And so, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, as you start diving into the entrepreneurship side of things, when you first start, man, it's like, it's that fight or flight. Like you have to make it work, right? So you do, and you put in the time, you put in the energy, you put in the work, and then it starts working. And then it's easy, if you're not careful, to get to that complacency.
Yep.
We're like, well, this is working. And so then again, we get into that comfort zone of like, well, this is where I'm comfortable. And even though I want more, sometimes it's easier to stay there because it's what we know. Then again, the potential unknowns of as if we'd go in a little bit harder. So I think, intentionally keeping, our feet to the fire, so to speak, on trying to avoid too much complacency as we do start to get some success, and then just remembering the fire that got us started and the fire that we had to have when it was just us and getting that rolling. So I think that's important for continued progress. And that's always important to me is, kind of progress over everything. Right. I want to kind of circle back a little bit too on just kind of your intro of like who you are and all that good stuff. And with your military, you said 11 years is the time you spent, and you talked about choosing that at 18, and maybe it's the transition right into manhood. How do you view that now versus maybe how you did then? And that's, I guess, the second question would be what drove you to that? Because I think what drives a lot of guys to serve is different.
Mm.
I think some it's like this they felt this duty to country and like wanted to do that. And for other guys, like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life, so I might as well do this. I can get school paid for, and there's some things and I don't think that's wrong. I'm just saying it. The motives are different for everybody. So how do you view it now versus how you're viewing it going in?
That's a great question. So I tell the seller when in high school, I was a straight A student. I was honor roll 4.0 student. And I think that just comes with being Asian, right? Having to make sure that, I'm bringing good grades home to the family. But it was about my junior year. And actually, even before this, my dad had served in the Army for a little bit. And he kind of pushed us to go that route once we, at some time in our life, not necessarily right as we turned 18. And so I had it always in the back of my head that I wanted to serve my country, right? And I think I didn't know I was doing it at 18 when I was like 15, 16, 17 years old. But right at my junior year, my parents had gotten a divorce, and I knew that I was planning on sticking around the Vegas area to go to college, take care of my mom, and pursue school, and eventually become an officer in whatever military I decided to join. And then when my parents got divorced, that kind of catapulted me to do my own thing. So as soon as I turned 18, I went to the recruiter's office, and I knew that I wanted to be a Marine because my best friend actually, he was dating my sister at the time. He was kind of like my brother-in-law. He was a Marine. He's 2 years my senior, and he did a couple deployments to Iraq, and I was just like, man, that's kind of what I want to do, His name is Sam, and I went to the recruiter's office, and I remember I forgot they're called like tags. The guys that if the guys that are watching this that are Marines are probably gonna crucify me right now, but there's like these tags that you choose 3 of them that essentially based off of why you want to join the military. And I remember the first one being pride of belonging, being one of them, because again I think I felt a duty to my country, but at the same time I think hidden down deep below there was also that like wanting to prove myself at that age, right? And so fast forward 10, 15 years later, right? Yeah, I guess 15 years now. It was definitely like wanting to prove myself, right? To, my family and my friends, and ultimately for myself to see if I could do it. Because, I was maybe 120 pounds soaking wet when I joined the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
And wasn't, a physical specimen by any means, right? Played a lot of video games growing up.
Yeah.
So I just didn't have, I was just too stupid to quit at that time.
Sure. Which sometimes ends up being a good attribute sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Ignorance is bliss.
That's right.
Cool. Now, you said you were first generation from your family being immigrants. Do you know why they ended up in Alaska?
Yeah, my aunt, my oldest aunt. So my mom has 11 brothers and sisters. It's, again, huge family. Sure. And my eldest aunt, she wanted to move to Alaska for school, and so she did that. And I think during that time, I think it was in the 70s, late 70s. I think saw a lot of great opportunity because when she moved to Anchorage, Alaska, she saw a huge Asian community there, and convinced my grandparents, like, hey, this is a great opportunity. It's easy to get up here, get better, paying jobs or whatever. Although it is freaking Alaska, right? Like going from the Philippines. So then my grandparents followed, and then just like any Asian family, wherever mom and dad is at, like I got to be close to home. So the rest of the aunts and uncles and stuff like that. But a lot of my uncles and aunts were still under 18, right? So they had to follow
Sure.
The parents, right? And so that's kind of how they got their start. My mom actually was the last family member to move to Alaska because she was married previously before my dad, and she had her own business selling car parts with her husband at the time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you have any family left in the Philippines?
Not immediate. No.
Okay.
No.
Have you been back there to visit where everyone's from?
I have. Yeah. Twice when I was growing up, my family brought us down there out of Manila, and then I went 3 times when I was in the Marine Corps.
Right on. So in an effort to keep, our podcast always kind of with some sort of kind of general theme and topic, you and I discussed beforehand on this, just some things that were kind of on our mind and potential things we wanted to discuss. And one of them was, for lack of better title, all your eggs in one basket versus your eggs spread out between several baskets. So let's dive into that a little bit, and depending on the context of all those things, and I think there may be benefits to both, but let's dive into that and kind of see where you're at right now with that.
I'll start off by saying that this is super cliche, right? And it's said in a very prestigious military movie, Lone Survivor. The guy that's in the background would take reference to this, but anything worth doing is worth overdoing. Moderation is for cowards. And so I unfortunately, I think I live by that credo. And so anything that I do, I try to do it to the best of my ability, right? And so, and it's not like I get bored, or maybe I do get bored at, once I feel like I've, reached a part of plateauing, right? It's like, hey, let's move on to the next thing, or let's try to grow something else. So, definitely guilty of putting too many, wearing too many hats, if that's a good way of saying that, But
and when you say you're guilty of that, explain that to me. You're guilty of that, meaning like where has that shown up? Because if you say you're guilty for it, I'm guessing you feel there's a negative connotation to that. So
yeah, I feel like there's a negative because I still feel like I'm not able to give my 100% into a specific thing that I know could be better.
Okay.
Right. So like from my eyes looking at it, it's like, oh, I could be doing this, right? Whereas hopefully someone that is on the receiving end of, whether it be my service or whatever, is like, oh man, this is great, right? But then in the back of my head, I'm thinking, oh, I'd like to do this, or I'd like to, do a little bit more, or I can do this, but then it requires time, or, understanding of honesty, and taking a look at my ego and being like, hey, like you're not as good as you think you are. You need to kind of hit the reset button or whatever the case might be. Yeah.
So give me an example of that, and like where you've noticed that you were doing that, and the change or the shift that you made to correct that.
Oof. I think I'm still struggling to find the balance, right? So, like right now, between, so other than, my full-time, so let's go back to my full-time, like what pays the bills, right?
Sure.
What pays the bills is my ability to teach individuals how to shoot a rifle proficiently, and, teach them the basics of long-range shooting, whatever, again, whatever their target is, shooting is shooting, and being able to do that on demand and teach people that, is again what pays most of the bills. And then as a secondary to that, for me, my ego tells me that, okay, well, as a instructor, I should be able to compete with some of the best shooters in the nation, right? So now there's that other pool of Phillip Velayo, the competitive shooter, right? That takes time and energy of, reloading, going to matches, practicing myself, right? Because, as an instructor, I probably shoot anywhere between 50 to 80 rounds a class where my students are shooting 400, so my ability to sustain my skill set happens at these competitions or these events. So after I get done shooting competitively, now I have to, do marketing and, video work and stuff like that for, obviously my company and, other, relationships that I've established, because I felt that I needed, for me to grow in that space, needed to broaden my horizons, right? And rather than just stick to one specific thing. Because I've noticed that specifically in the long range industry or the firearms industry, they just suck at marketing, digital marketing, right? And that's, it's so key nowadays to have digital marketing, right? With Instagram, social media, YouTube. Like if you don't have it, you're I shouldn't say you're nothing, but you're irrelevant per se.
Yeah. And that's somewhat what, established this relationship, right?
Yeah.
And, that might be interesting for people to know that there might be some people watching this going there, why are these guys, why does he do his social stuff? So I'd gone to a couple masterminds, year ago, I guess. Vertical Union is what it was called. Shout out to Keaton Hoskins and Rob Bailey for putting those on. They combined efforts of their two coaching groups, Limitless Society and then Clear, Calculated, and Vicious. The latter, CCV, is the mentorship that I'm part of. But they put on these masterminds, Vertical Union, and I attended two of them. And in leaving those, rather than just going there and getting jacked up with motivation to go out and conquer the world and conquer what is my world in entrepreneurship, I try to leave with action items, right? And each time I had left with the action item, one was I wanted to start building a better presence on social media, just in an effort to kind of build my brand, inspire people, educate people, do those things. And then when I left the second one to build onto that, I was like, I think I want to start a podcast. Let me rephrase that. I think I should start a podcast, because there's a lot of me that didn't want to. You fight the, what am I going to tell people?
Yeah.
Why are people going to listen to me and all that kind of stuff? But you just conquer the inner bitch and you do it anyways. But when I had come home from that with the action items, I'm like, okay, these are my action items. How am I going to do that? Because for me, just like what we're talking about, I have so many irons in the fire, right, and so many different hats that I choose to wear, and so many hats that I have to wear. I don't have the skills or the time to do this. How am I going to make this work? So I'm starting to think about all this. And I was sitting at my desk. I was working. I think it was a Saturday. I was in there working. Phil comes in to train, stops my office. We start visiting for a minute. He goes, hey, I wanted to talk to you about something. And you say, you essentially, explain what you're saying here is like, hey, like I feel like I've pigeonholed myself a little bit and I need to broaden my horizon to make me better at what I'm doing. And so you talk about, what do you think about maybe linking up with the Barbell Club and, building some content, doing stuff like that. And I just started smiling when you were telling me about it. And I said, well, it's a bit serendipitous that you would bring this up, because I just left with that action item, right? And for me, that was just like another example, proof of thoughts become things. You put it out in the universe and you start working towards it. Even if it feels like you're spinning your wheels, those opportunities are going to present themselves. And that's been proven to me time and time again. So here we are, episode 7 of the podcast. Been building, content and increasing presence on my social pages for the Barbell Club and my personal page, and little by little doing those things that I set out to do. And so that's kind of how all this came to be. So, and what we're talking about is like, essentially trying to find balance in life at the same time not having balance.
Yep.
It's an odd thing, because we need to be well-rounded, but in order to have things really take off, we got to go all in. So, for me, I'm a big Flag Nor Fail fan, as you know, and they had a run of shirts and hats for a while where it had the word balance and it was crossed out because it was the premise that in order to really get to where you need to be, you can't have that balance. You have to go all in. And I've always struggled with that a little bit. Like, as much as I believe that, I also feel like there's the other side of that coin where I'm like, but I also need these other things that make me me. I've looked at this a lot in my life. So yesterday is my brother's birthday. He's 11 years my senior. We were at his house for birthday celebration. And he was reading one of his birthday cards that his mother-in-law had given him. And she referenced him as the Renaissance man. And it was interesting to me because years ago I had gotten a card from my sister for a birthday, and she had referenced me as the Renaissance man. And that was when in my teenage years. And for those people that don't know what a Renaissance man is, it's essentially saying that someone that does everything, that can do all sorts of things. And it's from the Renaissance period and things like that, and how resourceful people were and everything. But the general term is just, someone that can and does everything. And that's always kind of been me. And I've often looked at my life. I'm like, well, what if I had consolidate and put more of my eggs in just one basket, right? So I think about that. Like, I was a 5-sport athlete growing up, right? And I was above average in all of them, but I never really was in the top 1% to 2% of any of them. And at the same time, I was also a musician. I was a guitar player. I've been playing guitar since I was 13. So I've also wondered, okay, well, what if I hung up the cleats, hung up the athletics, did all that, and just went all in on guitar? I would be twice the guitar player I am now, potentially. But I'm like, but I would have missed those other things. Or, I did all these sports. What if I just honed in on one? What if, pick any of them, soccer? What if I just honed in on soccer? Put all my chips in that. But would I have gone somewhere with it? Would I have played college? Maybe. Would I, having done that, would I have been good enough to maybe even go past that? Who knows, right? It's all hindsight's 2020. You speculate, you don't know. But I would have missed it. I would have missed those other things. And I think part of being well-rounded is also what gives me success right now in my current business.
Yeah.
Because I was a 5-sport athlete, now when I work with clients of any demographic, or when I was doing physical therapy, it didn't matter what the sport-specific activity was. I probably had some sort of personal experience with it that would then stack on with my expertise from my training and my schooling. So I've seen so many times where being well-rounded helped me connect with people. And essentially, no matter what your business is, it's going to be building rapport and connecting with people. And so I've also found value in being well-rounded that way. But I can't help but sit back and wonder, what if I would have gone all in on one, And then now from a business side of it, right? Like, I have to go all in on the barbell club.
Yep.
Because that's what I chose to do, right? I snipped the ties everywhere else so that I could focus on this and building this brand and this company. And so that's what I'm doing. And it's sometimes I look at all the irons I have in the fire, and it makes what I'm trying to do here a little bit more stressful because of the time that I lack, right? Because I'm an active musician still, right? So my band plays, relatively frequently. I'm working on an album right now we're hopefully going to have out in the next month. I'm a father, right? I have 2 small children. You're a father, right? So we have all these other things, and we own another business that, my wife kind of runs that one. I run the barbell club, but we have so many factors, and it's crazy. It's controlled chaos at best. And I just can't help but think about and ponder. I'm like, would it be better if I rolled some things back? Would it not be better? And I don't know that I've established what my opinion or what my answer is to that. So what I've done in the meantime is I've tried to shift my focus and go, okay, I wear lots of hats, just like you. What's important is maybe eventually I'm going to consolidate and have less hats that I wear so that I'm not robbing Peter to pay Paul as much. But however, as of right now, I need to show up wearing the hat that I'm going to be wearing for that occasion.
Yep.
And so I've been working really hard on that mental exercise of, okay, I've been training clients all day. First one was at 8 a.m. that morning, got done at 7 p.m., and 7 p.m. is when my workout starts.
Yep.
I'm tired. Been working with people all day. It's exhausting. And now I've got to find the mental fortitude to then switch to have what I need to train me and get out of my workout what I need. So I switch and I make this mental exercise. I'm like, okay, I'm switching hats. And I also switch fuel tanks. So I have a fuel tank in my brain for each hat that I'm wearing. Okay, my training one, my personal training one, working with people, that one's empty at this point. Now I'm switching tanks to like my own physical fitness, my own training for myself. Once we're done with that, then maybe I've got to transition back into business owner Barbell Club Luke. I've got to switch to that reserve. And then now it's time to switch, and I've got to show up and be husband Luke and father Luke. And by that time, it just, again, it feels like your tank's empty. So this mental exercise of, and I'll even do like some like box breathing, just like a brief, like almost like a meditation of like, I need, it's very important to me to show up the way I need to show up. And some days I do better of it than others, but that's been helpful for me with all these hats that I wear, of that mental exercise of, yeah, I'm tired, but I've got a different fuel tank for that.
Yeah.
The brain only knows what you tell it, right? And it's just that changing that perception, and not looking at all these irons in the fire as a weight and as a negative thing that I have to carry, but they're things that I've chosen, things that are important to me, and balance with a line through it. I'm like, well, that balance on those different things also is what keeps me grounded, and some of them help me sharpen the saw, right? Getting on stage and playing music, getting in the gym and training, lifting weights, those are some moments where everything else goes away for a bit. And I think it's important to find those too. So that's something that I've been doing lately and it's been on my mind as I ponder should I have committed more to just one? Should I commit to more just one now? Like, what does that balance look like,
Yeah, that's I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, it's just like, you always hear, as you work your way up the entrepreneurship, ladder and stuff like that, trying to have that work-life balance, and to make sure that your life is plentiful and stuff like that. And I struggle with this because I'm always like battling my inner demons of that, right? Like you said, I'm a father. I have a significant other who inspires me to do a lot of things, and I want to make sure that I show up for her in ways that she shows up for me. But more particularly, especially as a father, right? My first 10 years of my daughter's life, I was not very present, right? Because of my commitments to the Marine Corps. But now with everything that I have going on, I still try to, what you say, exercise okay, hey, I'm here now in this role, in this hat. It's time to stay present, right? But I think based off of where you're at, where your goals are in life, you're always going to have those things in the back of your head, right? Of, hey, I should be doing this right now, right? And even when I'm competing, let's say, right, in my head, I'm thinking I should be at home right now.
Yep.
I should be with my family right now.
Yep. Yeah, man, it's tough. And I think, when you look at people that are uber successful, I'll give you an example. I watched this a while ago when it came out, because I haven't really watched in a series or a movie or hardly anything for the last 5 years since having small children. They're far and few between those chances. But the documentary that came out several years ago that was called The Defiant Ones, it was about Jimmy Iovine, Dr. Dre, and just a few of the artists that were connected with that, but especially those two guys I mentioned first. And it looks at the success that they had, and it highlights a few other people they're connected with. But I've looked at so many of these people that get to that very, like the tip top, like 1%, and not all of them, but there's a good handful that when you look behind them, you look at the success, you're like, wow, it's incredible. But when you look behind them, there's a wake of destruction.
Yeah.
There's failed marriages, there's failed families, there's bridges that were burned that shouldn't have been. There's, and they're like, oh, it's the cost of doing business. And I'm like, well, yeah, I guess it depends on what your priorities are, man. And like for me, I try to find that balance of chasing my worldly goals, my secular goals, but I also like try to keep that eternal perspective. Like, what are the things that really matter?
Yeah.
What are the things that really matter past this life and that I'm going to take with me? And so I decided a while ago, I'm like, there's two things that I'm not going to put in front of my financial goals, and that's my family and my health. Those things are very important to me because if and when, and I'm planning on it, but if and when I get to those said financial goals, my health and my family are the two things that I especially want there with me.
Yeah.
Right? Because you see people, they get there, but then they have this wake of destruction and they don't have the people that they love the most to share it with. They certainly don't have their health. So I'm like, what the hell was it for then? So for me, I'm like, I just want to keep that perspective and that order of operation, that I don't want to put any of those other said goals in front of those two things. And I try to do that, and I'm trying to show up the way I need to, when I need to be husband Luke, father Luke, things like that. And some days I do better than others, but I'm really trying, man. But I just think, like most things, like recognizing that and keeping it on your radar is the first step, and then taking the action items to hopefully find that. But balance, man, I don't know what that's supposed to look like. And maybe, I think everyone has their opinions, and they're like, no, there is no such thing as balance if you're gonna do your thing. I'm like, but there has to be. Yeah. To some point, there has to be. Otherwise, something's going to give, and it might be the things that you absolutely love the most. Yeah.
It's funny that you talked about that about the finances and having your family come first. That me and Claire just recently watched a show on Netflix. It's called the Fall of the House of Usher. Have you heard about it? Mm-mm. Okay. Really great series. It's like a mini series, but at the very end of it, kind of a spoiler alert, but at the very end of it, the district attorney is standing over the grave of a very wealthy man and was saying that, hey, like, I'm the richest man in the world because I'm going back home to my family after this, after I get done saying my piece to you, and like that right there, like, I mean, it struck a chord with me, because like he was right, like, nothing beats that. And I think for me, because of my foundation of family, like growing up, that was always a non-negotiable for me. I know I put it off to the side for the longest time to pursue my goals. And I think I knew at the end of the day that it was a necessary sacrifice in order to accomplish a specific thing that I wanted to at some point in my life. But now, I can't do anything without my family.
No, you can't, man. And it's, yeah, man, like I like that. Like, I'm the richest man in the world because of what I'm going home to right now. And, I'm a big bearded dude, but I'm also an emotional dude. And, it gets me thinking about my family, man, and my kids. And it's this, I have this whiteboard in my office that kind of keeps a couple things like meetings that I have in the week and just keeps me kind of organized a little bit. But on the top of that board, I have, Team Crewback is my why, my children, my wife, they're my why, and they're why I'm putting in the long days, and why sometimes there's going to be some long nights. And so there is a little bit of that sacrifice, but it's finding enough of a balance that I can still be there for them. Heard this quote once, and it was like, the only people that are going to remember you burning the midnight oil are your kids. Yep. So, but sometimes it has to be there. Sometimes you have to be gone. You have to sacrifice, but trying to get them to understand why, and then still showing up enough, and even all the more reason to, if you do have to sacrifice some time, that when you are going to be there, like, try to be there. Yeah. Try to show up. Try to be present, and it matters, man. And it's like anything else. It's a skill. You have to recognize what those, different weak points are and where you're leaking efficiency, and try to plug those holes and do what you can, with the resources you have. But I don't know you'll ever find like the perfect
concoction.
Yeah, exactly. So it's constantly making adjustments, and I think it'll change too as the business changes and things like that. But with right now, there's a lot of the business, I'm wearing a lot of different hats just within the business too, but with time, hopefully, getting a bigger team built up, for the Barbell Club that allows me more time. But there's a few things that have to be done to getting to that. So definitely going to be some sacrifice in there, but I think it's important that we remember what really matters, and keep that, like I said, as I referenced, as kind of the eternal perspective of everything. Because that's one of the toughest things, man, I think, is to live in this world but not of it. Yeah. And it's a challenge, but I think thinking about it, having that awareness is obviously the first step. So when I chatted with you and was like, hey, what's on, we were talking about potential topics, and you brought that one up. Do you feel like that's something that you've been making some changes with recently, or it's just something you've been thinking about more?
Yeah, I think just things that always come to mind, right? It's always on the back of my head, because I know that just like with anything else, as you start to excel in one area, there's another area that's going to be very deficient, right?
Yeah.
So it's just the human nature. So
Yeah.
I think with it coming down to the end of the year, making plans, projections for next year, trying to make sure that, again, I'm not overcommitting myself to future relationships or projects,
Yeah.
right? And then making sure that, that the relationships that I establish are not tied to business, right? That's a huge thing with me, like, for instance, like as a competitive shooter, I'm sponsored from buttstock to muzzle brake of a rifle, right?
Sure.
But a lot of those relationships are built through trust and understanding and having a good relationship, right? And so I wanted to make sure that any relationship that I did get into is more of a partnership, right? Of like, how can we support our visions to grow, right? Not just a paycheck.
Absolutely, man. It's like coming out from an angle where we both win, right?
Yep.
I went through I've talked about this in some other podcast. I think I talked about in episode 5 where I was talking about the programs that run your unconscious mind, right? I gave a shout out to Clemmer and Associates, company that I went through some leadership workshops through, and they did an activity with us in one of them where they divide the room in half, and it was going to be this game, it was going to be this competition, right? And I don't even remember what the actual like game was, but you had to try to figure out this puzzle or this game or this problem before the other team did, right? So they split them up, and like the room gets loud, everyone's talking, everyone's trying to figure it out. We got to beat them, we got to get the speed, we got to go that. And so when they laid out the rules, they had it set up in a way that it was very challenging. And as they laid out the rules, they never said anything about the other team. They never even really said anything about your individual teams. They just split us up. But then we automatically assumed the position that we're against you. And so it was this exercise to get you to realize that, well, why didn't you just come together and solve the problem?
Yeah.
Because I think it was set up in a way where they had something we needed and vice versa. But it's like, why didn't you guys just work together on that? And it was this weird, like, how automated we are of like, it's me versus you. And it's like, why can't we look at it from an angle where everybody wins? And that's, I think, what you're talking about with those partnerships is like, it's more than just one person helping the other. It's like, let's build and grow together. Let's take each other with each other as we work towards those goals. And I think that's something that I've mentioned before also in previous podcasts, is that I believe that our inability to win or succeed has to do with our inability to watch other people win.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important concept to grab a hold of. So when we talk about balancing life and we talk about all those things, balance or not balance, I think if we're going to find balance, we have to find those things that kind of anchor us.
Yep.
Right? So one of the things that for me is an anchor is fitness. My time in the gym, I joke, right, is what keeps me from killing people. Like it's my therapy, it's my Prozac, it's whatever I need it to be, right? Some days it's about making muscle, and other days it's just about my mind. So fitness is one for me. And would you say fitness and your workouts are that way for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and that didn't come until I became a Marine.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, I didn't really work out growing up. I think I did have a gym membership through my family, so there was a couple times I went to I think it was like 24 Hour Fitness in Las Vegas every now and then. But I joined the Marine Corps doing 3 pull-ups, which is a bare minimum, right?
Sure.
And now, by the time I transitioned out of the Marine Corps, I was doing 20 pull-ups, 20 to 25. I was about 190 pounds, and, I was running 21 3-mile. And I think that was still just the, bare minimum of like making specific, requirements for score for the Marine Corps fitness program, right? Completely separate from my duties as an instructor and what I was doing in the military. And so now, as I transitioned out, one of the more important things for me is making sure that, obviously there's a lot of image there, right? With my previous background, right? And so upholding that image, especially when I'm in online, on the line, or in front of students, right? In-person classes,
Yeah.
right? That I look the part.
Sure, man.
Right.
Yeah.
And
It's
so
part of your brand book, right?
Yeah, it's part of the branding,
Yeah.
And so how we started our relationship was when I first moved here, I was at Anytime Fitness in Cody, and I would make the drive and stuff like that across town, which again, it's just coming from Orange County, California, like that was not too far of a drive. But now, after living here for 5 years, that's a drive. Like,
funny.
When my daughter wants to go to Walmart, I'm like, nope. And so, my old coworker Zach, who works out at the Barbell Club, he was like, "Hey man, you gotta go to the Barbell Club." I'm like, "Where's that at?" He's like, "It's actually right by the new gunwork shop." And I'm like, "Man, that's like behind the house,
Yeah.
And then I went in there, walked in, and I was like, "Okay, this is where I need to be."
Sure.
Yeah, and so, yeah.
So what was it when you first walked in the Barbell Club that sold you?
I mean, immediately the atmosphere, right? How you built it, how it was designed. Obviously, our communication, your passion for getting others into the gym, right? I immediately detected that with you. Very similar with me, my passion for getting people into the sport of long range shooting. I immediately saw that with you with fitness, right? Of wanting to, and I continue to see it with you with all the videos that we do. And a lot of your approach is how I try to take with my approach now, to inspiring somebody to, be present behind a precision rifle, as we call it.
Yeah.
But yours is being present in the gym, but to be, build a better you.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Having that intention behind it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's funny you talk about the location thing. There's people that like fitness is just like a very small component of their life. And for some people, they just don't care where they do it.
Yeah.
And it's like location wise.
Yeah.
And I've had a handful of people join the gym and they're like, yeah, because I'll ask them, I'm like, hey, how'd you hear about us? How'd you find us? What drew you to the Barbell Club? And there's been a handful where like, oh, well, it's really close to my house. And I'm like, what? I'm like, it's Cody. Like everything's close. It's all relative, right? I mean, across town is 15 minutes tops, right? Probably. Yeah. So, for me, that was never but the gym is such a big anchor in my life that when I was studying physical therapy, I was a member of 3 different gyms.
Wow.
And so depending on what I was training that day, right, and everything else would depend on which one I would go to. And when I was living in Cheyenne, I would drive down to Denver.
Wow.
Every other week or so to go train down at Armbrust Pro Gym down there, just for the atmosphere, just for the equipment, and pay whatever it was, $50 for a day pass, just because that's my playground, right? Enjoy it. It's what I do for fun. But, I always ask people, I'm like, what brought you here? And I think a lot of people, what they do appreciate, like you said, is the atmosphere.
Yep.
And that was one thing that I wanted to build that I felt like was missing, was a place that just had the atmosphere that was conducive to reaching our goals, whatever those are. And we've got such a wide range now of folks, but the thing we all have in common is that strength training is the number one, catalyst that gets us there. So it's been awesome. It's been a fun ride to have that, and fun to get so many people from different walks of life in there too. So with your fitness, what is that like? What are your current like fitness goals now?
Man, I'm on a roller coaster when it comes to that, right? We've talked about this right before I was getting out of the Marine Corps. My good friend, who was, he was in high school. He was really overweight and unhealthy overweight. We would always go to McDonald's in the mornings and grab back then there was a dollar menu. We'd get the sausage McMuffins or chicken sandwiches and stuff like that for $1.
Those McGriddles, though.
Yeah.
Man. Oh, those McGriddles.
And so he ended up joining the Army. We kind of kept in touch throughout the years, but always stayed, really, really close. And he started getting into like men's physique show, amateur men's physique shows and stuff like that. And I just saw his transformation. I was like, holy crap, man. Like if he can do it, like, and so I think it was like my last year. Again, I didn't hire a coach. I was just kind of going off his program, sort of counting macros and stuff like that. And it was like, at that point, the best shape and best looking that I'd ever been, in terms of working out, because again, I was an instructor, so I was rucking all the time. But I just was happy with the way that I was built, essentially. And then unfortunately, I ended up getting tennis elbow in my left forearm, and it was pretty painful, right? And I got to a point where I was like, okay, I need to take care of this, because I was already getting ready to transition out. So I wanted to make sure that I took all the necessary steps so that I didn't carry on to, my, after, because I wasn't sure how the health system worked post-military, right? So I started going to physical therapy, kind of neglected the gym a little bit, and then gained some weight back. And then when I came out here, started to get back. So to answer your question right now, based off everything I've got going on, is really just to maintain, but I think still in the back of my head, I eventually want to get into more a fitness that allows me to stay in a very athletic lifestyle, right? Because as a long range shooter, I'm also big into long range hunting, and these mountains out here are very unforgiving, right? So working up to this hunting season, I was doing a program with one of our riflemen. He's a strength and conditioning coach, and he has a backcountry hunting program that worked out really well for me this year. But I think, still in the back of my head, I want to at least see if I have the discipline to do some type of like men's physique show, because I follow, like I said, I follow all those guys and stuff like that. And I think it's just that the mental discipline, right, of being able to, show up, right, as Andy Frisella talks about, like, I know that mental discipline will eventually carry on to something else in your life, right? And for me, that's like competitive shooting, right? Because I know there are times as a competitive shooter, I just like kind of give up on myself. I'm just like, it's not my match, right? So then I just kind of throw in the towel. But I know that if I exercise that muscle a little bit, I think I'll, end up being better off.
Yeah, man. I think, there's so many people that I come across in the gym, or that I end up visiting with, and they're just like, well, I just don't have time for this.
Yeah.
I'll even have, I think we have a good retention rate and actually very little churn at the barbell club. But, I get the occasional people that request to cancel because they don't have time. And none of them get out of it without a conversation with me. It's like, you can't afford not to.
Yeah.
You literally can't. I go, you're either going to invest in it now or you're going to pay for it later.
Yeah.
Like that, I believe that to my core. And, you talked earlier about fitness being, a part of like kind of your brand book of like, you kind of have to look the part, And like for me as a gym owner, like imagine if I was out there selling fitness and I was rolling around everywhere, like looking like Jabba the Hutt, like it doesn't make any sense. Like if people would give it a chance and realize that it's not a bad thing. It's not vain to like want to look good.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you have the discipline that it takes for that, like most people, I can't remember the guy's name, but I saw that it was this reel that was going around. He's like, when I see a man that's in shape, he's like, I see a man that has discipline. I see a man that has follow through. I see all of these things because that's what it takes. And you start showing up for yourself, then you're stacking this evidence and you're stacking the wins that are going to help you throw that into the other areas of your life. For those other irons on the fire, for the other hats you're wearing, as we've been talking about for this podcast. I encourage people to find fitness to be one of those hats that you wear. It has to be, because otherwise you're not going to be maximizing who you are. And it's going to be part of your brand book. Even if you're not going for a certain look to can stay connected to like, hey, I'm a Marine, or hey, I'm a gym owner. It's part of your brand book. Yeah. And the amount of confidence that you're going to gain from stacking those wins and changing your physique for the better, it's going to leak positivity into the other avenues of your life. And I'm going to be over and over a broken record on the Progressive Resistance podcast when I talk about strength training being the truth, because of seeing it do that time and time again with clients that just came in because they knew they needed to probably do it because their doctor told them, or they're like, I'm getting older and I can tell I'm not as strong. But then it transitions into so much more. They start noticing increased confidence. They start looking better. Their marriage gets better. They have better relationships. They're more productive at work. They're sleeping better. Like all of these things that secondarily come from that, if people would just give it a freaking chance. It's the truth, man, and people need to do it. And I think people should include it into their brand book. What do you want to look like? What do you want to feel like? You have kids, like you want to be able to like do stuff with your kids and like hang with them, and it's important, man. And I just wish more people would give it a chance, because it has to be there. And it might look different in different areas of your life, right? You talk about kind of the for lack of a better term, I'll just call it cross training, right? We all do some sort of cross training, meaning we have some goals, but we also have these other things that we need to be functional for. And I think there's a lot of people that are cross training that get afraid of, not necessarily afraid of, but they put on the back burner just like normal generic strength training. Because like, well, I'm doing it so I can be in the hills, so I'm going to do all this, and I see people doing that. I'm like, yeah, you need to do that stuff, but without your meat and potatoes also thrown in there, that's this other stuff's going to suffer. We want to build that strength and build that muscle, and then add those functional tasks to make sure that we can use this muscle we've built for being out in the hills and doing all these things. But I think they both can fit together beautifully. We just got to find what that balance is. I see a lot of people doing it, and they come in and it's only like sport specific things. And I'm like, yes, you need those, but stack them with your general strength and hypertrophy stuff. And you're going to be like, wow, this is different. And I think a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to put on a bunch of size because then it makes me heavier when I'm hiking. I'm like, I wish it was that easy, right? Oops, I shouldn't have done those extra 2 weeks of strength and hypertrophy squats, because now it just doesn't work that way. But getting people to find that balance, plug in your baseline compound movements, and then stack them with that other stuff, man, that's when you start feeling like a dangerous dude that's ready to conquer everything that you're setting out to do.
I think too, like it really, like one thing that I noticed is like it truly starts with nutrition, right? Mm-hmm. And I know we've talked about this, and I know we're probably being a dead horse among other, podcasts and fitness influencers out there. But, a lot of too, what my drive is because I come from a family. So I come from a family of chefs, right? And, like Filipino food is not the healthiest food for you. And, a lot of my family, uncles, aunts, a little overweight, right? And a lot of what drives me to stay in shape is to avoid, obviously, A, looking like them, right? But B, running into the health problems that they've run into now, right? Mm-hmm. Now that they're older, sure. Right? And so that, you bring up a good point. It's like, hey, it's either you pay for it now, right? In the gym, right? With your time and your blood and your sweat and tears, or you pay for it later when you're always checking into the doctors and getting medications or prescriptions, or, something hurts. Right. And so, but I know, nutrition, it starts with that, because I know that like when I start to finally eat cleaner, right, I just have that much more energy to want to go to the gym, or when I'm at the gym, be there for, what I need to get done. Right. Versus just like, powering through the workout type stuff. Right. Cause we've all been there. Right. And one of the podcast or one of the shorts I remember doing for you about, you had just came off a trip from Las Vegas or a traveling trip, and you talked about rate of perceived exertion. Yeah. And it was the first time that I'd heard about that concept. I mean, it makes total sense, of like, hey, like sometimes you're not going to go to the gym and feel like it's, you can pull up hundreds, but as long as you give it as much as you could, guess what? You still got it in.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. And some days that's what it's about, is just the discipline to show up, and it might not be the best workout you've ever had, but the fact that you did it stacks up the evidence for you to continue to build the confidence and integrate that into, this is my lifestyle. This is something that I do. And it's a non-negotiable ultimately. Because if you don't have it set up as a non-negotiable, it's going to fall to the wayside, and you're going to be in this vicious cycle that a lot of people get in, where I was on for 3 months and then it went away, or and I see the guys do it around here where they're like, well, it's hunting season, so I'm going to cancel my membership and then I'll rejoin. I'm like, you're not in the hills for that full 3 months.
Yeah.
So like, and I know it's taxing for you, but it's different.
Yeah.
It's different than the taxes that were put on your body for that functional task. It's different. And so I just think encouraging people to have it as a non-negotiable so it doesn't slip off. Or I see people that, the busy time maybe is in the summer. So they work on their fitness all their time, and then they got to work in the summer for whatever their gig is. And I'm like, yes, but it might not look the same, and you might not have the same time to commit to that, but still keep it in, even if it's once a week, so that it stays. Again, you're stacking that confidence of like, this is something that I do, even if I have to modify it a little bit. And you're right, the nutrition is kind of where it starts and ends. We are what we eat. Yeah. And if you're not giving your body the fuel it needs, you're going to have a hard time recovering. You have a hard time having the energy needed for these workouts. And it's something that people have to find a way to do. And, the rate of perceived exertion, like you were touching on, is a helpful tool for that. Because if it was all about progressive resistance or progressive overload, I mean, I've been lifting since I was 13. Then if it was always about adding weight to the bar, then I should be squatting and deadlifting 2,000 pounds at this point, right? It doesn't work that way. So it depends on where you're at in your training. Even for me, the amount of weight I have on the barbell varies depending on where I'm at in my training. If I'm bodybuilding, if I'm powerlifting, if I'm just in an off season. So it might not always look the same, but one thing that is the same is you keep it as a fixture, and it remains as a non-negotiable. So there's been times in my life where I had 30 minutes to train. And I would go in, I would warm up, and if it was leg day, I would warm up, I would squat, and I would leave. But I still did it because, 30 minutes is better than nothing.
Yeah.
And it kept me on track with, this is my anchor. This is what helps me sharpen the saw. It's therapeutic in other ways besides just building my physique and being healthier. Some days it's just about the mind. So, well, for our sign off, for anyone that's listening that may be connected with Phil, right? What would your sign off be for those listening of, what's an action item or something they can take forward, or some encouragement or insight you could give for the sign off for this?
To keep it in relation to, I shouldn't say keep it in relation to your brand, but I think to keep it in the spirit of your podcast as a whole, is that there's no easy button.
Yeah.
But having commitment to whatever you decide to do is ultimately what's going to get you to your end point, right? And it's not going to be easy, right? Like if you think it's easy, then I mean, you might as well just give up, right? Mm-hmm. But I think the best part about it, right, is not necessarily the destination, but it's the whole journey as a whole, right? And that's what I've enjoyed the process of, right? Mm-hmm. The journey, and because once you feel like you've reached a goal, there's, especially if you have that mindset, there's another goal to tackle, right?
Yep.
And that journey is honestly is what makes the best part about it. So I appreciate you having me on this side of the camera.
Yeah, man.
I'm sure that we'll continue. This definitely has been a joy because it's a lot different than obviously the other podcasts that I do,
Sure.
which is strictly around long range shooting and stuff like that. So it's a kind of a breath of fresh air to be able to talk about other things I'm passionate about, right? Entrepreneurship and being a better version of ourselves.
For sure.
I love your message. I wish that I could help get it out to the world because it's important, and I see it, and I'm looking forward to growing this with you, man.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, man. And I appreciate you being on, and just to continue on that same line. Yeah, man. I guess my encouragement to people listening today is going to be, we talked about it in an earlier podcast. I gave that equation of what is life, and talking about that, we talk about the destination all the time.
Yeah.
Always these end goals, right? And it's important to have those longer targets, from a long range shooting, right? You've got your different stage of targets, right? And we've got that one that's way down range, but ultimately, man, nothing's promised in this life. We don't know if we get tomorrow. So that's why the journey is so important. And the journey ultimately is the destination.
Yeah.
Right. Cause we don't know when our expiration dates are. So it's soaking it in now, being present. And honestly, like the shirt says, man, embrace the discomfort, because the discomfort means that you're working towards growth, and discomfort is necessary for us to get to where we're going, and it's necessary for this life and for us to feel joy. So I just encourage anyone that's out there, if you're thinking about taking the step to do you, whatever that is, and you're nervous about it, good. Choose your hard.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to sit there knowing that you don't want to be where you're at. And it's hard and scary if you're going to jump, but just jump, because life's short, man. And I think we're all meant to step into our maximum potential if we so choose. You don't have to, but if you're nervous about it, that's good. And remember, you might be more nervous about succeeding than you are from actually failing. So get your brain wrapped around who you want to be, what you need to be, embrace the discomfort, build the better you, and for hell's sakes, get into the gym. Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, bro.